I heard arguments at the Supreme Court today about the constitutionality of state laws recognizing marriage as an institution between a man and a woman. The arguments made by those challenging these laws centered around whether or not principles of due process and equal protection, as guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, dictate a particular outcome in these cases. Those representing the states argued that regardless of how one feels about the definition of marriage, how marriage ought to be defined, this is not the appropriate forum for that to be decided. That is, that 9 justices wearing black robes who never stand for election shouldn't decide this issue for an entire country of more than 300 million people, but should instead allow this decision to be decided at the ballot box, to allow the decision to be made by the people themselves in their respective states.
Do you believe the states will win?
I think it's a very close call. It's difficult to say how the case is going to turn out. You've got 4 justices that rather clearly would like to see some type of decision recognizing a type of federal constitutional right to same-sex marriage. And that would include Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor. You've got 4 other justices who, based on their questions today, taken in combination with what they've written in the past, would seem to go in the opposite direction. And in that camp, I'd list probably Chief Justice Roberts, along with Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Justice Alito, my former boss. Justice Kennedy is therefore likely to be the swing vote in this case, as he is in so many other cases. Based on his questions today, it's difficult to say which way he's going to lean. Although I will say this, I was slightly more convinced walking into the courtroom that Justice Kennedy was going to lean toward the more liberal justices in this case than I was walking out of the courtroom. Justice Kennedy did in fact acknowledge significant doubts about whether or not it's a good idea to let 9 justices decide this for the rest of the country, rather than having people within their own states decide this for their own state law purposes.
What was the most interesting thing you learned today or heard?
It was interesting that the argument started out with questions asked by several of the justices about the fact that marriage has lasted through the millennia. It has been around for millennia. And during that time period, during those thousands of years, it has always been understood as involving a relationship between a man and a woman, and has never, until about 10 or 15 years ago, been identified as a marriage between 2 persons of the same sex. And so that was a question that was asked not just by some of those that you would expect to be asking that question. That was a question, in fact, raised by Justice Breyer, who many people expect, and I still expect, will likely be on the other side of this issue. But it's a legitimate question, and it's a question that was not an easy one for the attorneys to answer, even those attorneys who are challenging the state laws in this case and who are arguing that there ought to be a constitutionally protected right to same-sex marriage.